Let's get into what a purchase order and sales quote say and what it shouldn't say. It's the same as what you're looking for in a binding contract. If somebody sends you a 3-page contract, you are going to make sure that there's clarity on the seller, the buyer, the quantity, the price, the purchase, but also all the legal terms. We have to capture those as well in our sales quote and purchase order. So if you're a vendor and you're trying to do business on your sales quote and you want your customer to sign it and be binding and not have to negotiate a full contract, your sales quote needs to have the detailed terms. Sometimes they're incorporated with a link. This offer is subject to the conditions at this link. That is binding if you accept it. If you see a sales order as a customer with that kind of thing, you want to be careful to reject it. And that's why we never incorporate those sales quotes into our purchase orders. What you're deciding is how detailed to get on the description of what you're buying. Is it enough to just identify the item by name? The simpler, cheaper, less risky items you purchase, like a tray that's going to be used in the cafeteria, then you don't necessarily have to get into all the detail. But if you're buying a system that has to work a particular way, we typically will have more detail about the specifications of that. The way I like to add detail into a purchase order or a sales quote is with attachments. In the purchase order, I have to reference those attachments. Most purchase orders have a little square where you can put text. I use that. So I'll say, I'm buying a widget, specification in attachment B, schedule for delivery, attachment C, pricing, attachment D, whatever it is. So I will do those as attachments. You have to make sure you reference them in the copy or in the cover page of the PO so that they get there. You also have to be real careful about what terms and conditions are applying to the PO. I worked with a company that did not attach terms and conditions to their purchase orders. What terms applied? I have no idea. It could have been the sellers, it could have been the Uniform Commercial Code. It was very unclear how that was going to go. We have to be careful about. When you're doing your purchase orders and you're doing your sales quotes, you're always thinking of it as the contract. What are the contract terms between the parties? And how are you making sure that there's just one story? We make sure there's one story by looking at the totality of these documents. What does the sales quote say? Did we effectively reject it and not incorporate it into the purchase order? What does the purchase order say? Does it have the key commercial terms? Does it have the legal terms? And we're making sure there's one story. But sometimes vendors and customers will sign something called a master agreement or a framework agreement. And that framework agreement has all the legal terms, the indemnity, the IP, the different things, and says the parties may issue purchase orders to each other or orders that are governed by this agreement. If that's the case and you have that master agreement, you want your purchase order terms, whether it's on the cover of your purchase order or in the terms and conditions for your purchase order, to defer to that master agreement. You want to make sure that you don't stay silent. Somewhere in your purchase order, it should say, these terms and conditions govern this purchase order unless there is a signed agreement in place between the parties on this subject matter. So that is typically how most companies deal with the master agreement and the purchase order. You can be more explicit than that, but for most companies I work with, they include something in the terms and conditions in that references how it relates to the fact that the parties have a signed agreement, if that's something for that relationship.